And welcome to the second of these quick Q&A for Dynamic Range Day webcasts. Do you see what I did there? Cute, huh? So thanks very much for being here. Dynamic Range Day this year is this Friday, the 27th of March. And every day this week, I'm just doing a short kind of 15, 20-minute Q&A session just to help answer some questions that people have about dynamics and loudness and online loudness. To help raise awareness of the event. So before we start, please take a minute to share this video wherever it is that you're watching it. Grab the YouTube link or click share on Facebook and share it with your friends so that if anybody else you know might be interested can take a look. And while you do that, I'm just going to double check. Yesterday, my video bandwidth was very poor. Hi, Bob. Sunny Pembrokeshire. Indeed, that does make a change. Hi, Fred. Hi, Darko. Great to see all you guys here. Picture poor, but audio. Yeah, that's what happened yesterday. I think the bandwidth here is suffering because of all the people working from home because of the virus outbreak. And you will also hear some background noise today. I can see a lawnmower, or maybe it's a steamroller going over the cricket pitch out the window there. So I apologize. This room sounds great, but the soundproofing is not fantastic. I'm just going to try opening some other website just to see whether I can kind of prompt my bandwidth here into increasing. No, the picture quality looks pretty ropey, which is a shame. Let's just take a minute or two to try and improve that. I restarted my router this morning. I mean, it could be a limitation on the YouTube servers, I guess. I know that several of mind you, yesterday the image quality improved. See, the download speed is okay. I'm sorry, this is a very boring start to the Q&A. It would be nice if you guys could see me with some kind of clarity. It's good to hear that the sound is okay. Let's see what happens here. Okay, that's strange because I have decent upload speed here. Oh, okay, and there you go. The picture quality improved. Okay, so let's assume that it's going to be fine from now on. And has it? No. Okay. I'm not sure why this is so poor. I will try reducing the bandwidth of the. I was trying to upload in HD. We've now gone down to SD. Is that any better? Not looking good. Okay, well, as you guys are saying, it can't be helped. I don't have any direct control over the bandwidth here. I will fire off a message to the support and see if I can improve that at all for future broadcasts. It's a shame, but it is what it is. Let me just change a couple of settings here. Okay, there we go. So let's start again, and I can trim it on YouTube afterwards so that nobody watching the replay doesn't have to put up with all of that. Hello, and welcome to the second Dynamic Range Day quick Q&A. I did that the other way around the last time I said it, but it still works. Thanks for being here. As you know, Dynamic Range Day is on Friday, the 27th of March. That's in 2 days' time from recording this video. And every day I'm doing a short Q&A where I try and answer some of your questions and help raise awareness of the event. So let's get straight down to answering some questions. I thought the first one, I don't know whether this is meant to be slightly tongue-in-cheek or not, but Willie Dillon asked, are bands just deaf, or do they not have much control over their masters? Yeah, that's a slightly tongue-in-cheek question, but it tackles a serious issue. No, I don't think bands are deaf at all. I think there is an enormous pressure still. This pressure for loudness still exists. And that's one of the reasons for having this event, to try and make people aware that it's not required. And just to be clear, I talked about this yesterday. I'm not saying more dynamics are always better. And, as a mastering engineer, I'm always managing the dynamics of the music that I work with, getting the EQ and the tonal balance right, balancing that with the degree of compression and limiting to get things into the sweet spot, that perfect point, the perfect balance of dynamics and loudness, where it's loud enough but not too loud. So what do I mean by too loud? I'm talking about that, the kind of the -4 LUFS, the -6 LUFS, RMS, if you prefer, however you choose to measure your loudness. Those kind of values, for me, they don't work well in any kind of genre. There are unacceptable compromises to the quality. Having said that, if you're down at -16 and -18, and I talked a lot about this in yesterday's webcast, so I won't kind of go over it in huge detail, that could well not be loud enough for the streaming services that you're uploading to, but also in order to achieve the sound that you're looking for. Things do have to be loud enough. There is positive benefit to bringing the loudness up to a certain point, that same point that I've been mastering at for 25 or so years. Recently I found the second CD I ever mastered professionally on eBay, and snagged myself a copy and kind of, put it on thinking, oh heck, what's this going to sound like? And it sounded fine. It sounded great. And interestingly, the loudness was pretty much where I master things these days. I remember in my career getting to, I guess it must have been 1999, 2000, and kind of thinking, okay, I'm not going to try and compete with the accelerating trend there. I was already mastering at the kind of level that classic albums since whenever have sounded great at. I've carried on. They still sound great. They work great on streaming services, but they are, they have to be loud enough. So I'm not campaigning for kind of super low stuff. Now, that's fine, but there is this huge pressure on bands, on labels, on artists, even if it's just a perceived pressure, even if it's just pressure from the A&R department at the record company, or the label manager, or the band's manager, or maybe just one member of the band, whoever it is. If anybody, I've written about this before, this chain of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You've got at least 7 stages between something being recorded and getting out mastered into the world. And there are people involved, all of those 7 stages. And if any one of those people kind of goes, oh, maybe we should be pushing it louder, and kind of sows the seeds of doubt in everybody else's minds, that's how this happens. That's where this comes from. And I'm not meaning to trivialize it by any means. I also know that there are a ton of people, I'm saying, okay, the music needs to be loud enough, and that's loud enough in my opinion, as a listener and as a mastering engineer. And other people have different opinions about what loud enough is. There are, I think for me, -8 LUFS integrated is kind of the transition point. It's possible. I think it's possible to sound okay, not fantastic, but pretty good up to a kind of that level. And then it's all downhill all the way. I did an infographic a while ago called about the loudness cliff, where you kind of, you get push the loudness up and up and up and up. You plateau at the top where it sounds pretty good and it's loud enough. And then you go off the other side and you fall onto the rocks on the other side. And I think, kind of -10 is right at the summit for the loudest possible, where it's loud all the way through. So anyway, I do think that artists and bands, the original question, are bands deaf? I do think that they're focused on the music. They're not so much focused on the sonics, and they're focused on the emotion and the intent, and that's exactly as it should be. So, and the thing about the modern digital tools that we have is it is possible to go way further. Back in the day when I started out, if you were trying to master at -10 RMS or -10 LUFS, however you want to measure it, consistently through a song, you'd be pushing the hardware and the capabilities of what you're working with so hard these days, there's all this clever processing and all the rest of it. It's that much easier to get that much louder without blatant distortion and problems, without blatant clipping, distortion, all the rest of it. I still think the music loses something. That's why I have dynamic range day. I have not yet heard a super loud, by which I mean kind of above -11, -10 LUFS album mastered that I could truly love because of the sound. I'm waiting for that to happen. There are albums that are listenable to me and that I can still enjoy musically, but I don't have that extra pleasure that you get when it sounds fantastic. So that's quite a long answer to maybe a fairly tongue-in-cheek question. No, I don't think people are deaf. I think maybe they're focused in different areas and they don't notice the kind of the subtle stuff, the more subtle stuff. And also maybe they don't get that comparison, because I mean, this is the other thing that's happening these days, is that mix engineers are delivering mixes super loud. It's not necessarily the mastering engineers who are responsible for choosing the loudness level. If your clients have been listening to a mix ref that's been slammed through an L1 for weeks and they've fallen in love with it, and all of their comments and criticisms have been made based on that mix, and then you take that off for the master and do something different, they're not guaranteed that they're still going to like it. Maybe that means it's the wrong sound. For me, the answer to that question, it's a really tough thing. Artists and clients come to mastering engineers to get a third-party opinion, to get a professional opinion on what would be best, what's going to get the best results for their music. And we offer that. And part of what I comment on is how loud it should be. If the artist then says, no, I want this, it's my vision for this, that, and the other, that's where I respectfully step back and say, I'm not going to enjoy doing that to the music for you. That doesn't mean the artist is wrong. It just means my opinion is different. My opinion is based on my years of experience, my personal tastes, what I find works best in the widest range of listening environments, and also the fact that, so if somebody sends me something to master and I feel like it's already been pushed too hard, I will do the master using that mix, and I'll send it back and say, here you go, this is how I'm hearing this. I'm feeling like maybe I could get an even better result if I have something was less pushed to begin with. Is that possible? Is that something you're interested in? I'd love to do the experiment. I've never had a bad reaction from asking that question. Sometimes I get a flat no. It's like, no, that's what it is, or that's the way we want it to sound, or whatever. And okay, at that point, I go with the mix that I was given. But more often than not, the response is, yeah, sure, here you go. And they send it through. And I have always been able to get a result that they preferred, that I preferred, and that was less crushed, or that where the side effect of that crushing process, I'm saying crushed, pushed really hard, had been less pushed. The side effects were less unpleasant than originally. There was something in the original that made me think, oh, I wish I could do this differently than they've done it. And I always get a better result. So, that's my bedrock. That's what I believe in. And that's why I run this event and talk about this stuff all the time. So I had another question. I don't know if I'll be able to find it, of someone asking, just seeing if I can find it here on the, no, I can't find it, but it was a question about what kind of metering that I use. They found it confusing that there were different types of metering at every stage. So the answer is that I use a VU meter, but I use it in combination with a modern loudness units, LUFS meter. And if I'm mixing, I don't really pay attention to the overall level. I make sure things don't clip. I don't use a limiter on the output, but I'm completely focused on the sound if I'm mixing. What I tend to find is that the mixes come out somewhere in the realm of -16 to -14 to -12 LUFS. Yeah, probably not as high as -12, maybe -18. That doesn't concern me because I know that it's going to be resolved at the mastering stage. So I use a VU meter at that point, calibrated to -18. So then if the needles are hovering around 0 most of the time, pushing up to +1, +2 at some points, I know that I'm where I want to be with that loudness. And that corresponds to an LUFS of -18, pushing up to -16, -14 at the loud sections. Then when I come to master, Again, I'm using the VU, but I would recalibrate it. I have my VU calibrated to -11, which roughly speaking is an RMS value. But I mean, here's the thing: RMS, VU, and LUFS for something where the EQ is balanced, they're all pretty similar. So it doesn't make it's fine for you to choose. You go with what you prefer. And at that point, yeah, -11 is the 0 point on that VU meter, and then the levels can push up +1, +2 at certain points at the loudest moments. That works well. Another way of saying that is no louder than -10 LUFS for me at the loudest points of the music. And I talked yesterday about how I use that approach even in different genres and how that works for different genres. So just scroll back in the stream for the Dynamic Range Day page or my own personal feed, or head over to YouTube. The replay is there with similarly poor video quality. I'm afraid. I wonder if it's improved while I've been talking to you. Nope. Oh well. And so yeah, take a look at that, and hopefully that helps. So it's a VU meter or an LUFS meter. You could use an RMS meter, but RMS meters are fooled by bass. So are VU meters, but I'm used to it. I've worked with one for 25 years, so I'm comfortable with it. I understand the way that it reads. LUFS meters are less likely to be tricked by bass and are therefore probably more helpful for you guys. Let's have another question. Patrick says, do I notice music getting more dynamic in the last few years? No. It's the short answer. And yes, what I'm seeing is more polarization. I am seeing some more dynamic releases. There have been some fantastic sounding albums over the last year or two with more dynamics. Interestingly, a lot of metal albums, I feel, are kind of backing away a little bit in terms of the extreme loudness, which is kind of ironic, given that it's a genre that's famous for being loud. EDM is still right up there. Mainstream pop is kind of in the mid range. I've talked a lot about the Billie Eilish album this year and the way that it sounds and the way that it was mastered. It's loud. It's not super loud. It's not kind of stupid loud, but it's still 2 or 3 dBs louder than I personally would chosen to have mastered it. And a lot of mainstream pop, that's how it is. And the engineers who work on it will tell you that that's how it has to be. I've been over that topic. We'll leave it. At the other end of this, so most stuff is still really loud. Some stuff is extremely, absurdly, unbelievably loud. 0 RMS, 0 LUFS. Those tend to be extreme genres where it's quotes part of the sound. But I mean, I've mentioned this a few times. It's a couple of years ago now, but one of Miley Cyrus's albums that was just kind of folk pop was up at -4. Kylie Minogue had an album with levels at -6 and -4, and that just, and they sound congested and in a box. They don't cut loose. They don't have any. They're just kind of lumps of audio that just sit there. Makes no sense to me in those genres. But I genuinely don't understand it. But on the other hand, there are these other more dynamic releases. So it's polarized. I'm seeing the two extremes. Joe asks what my process is for referencing masters against commercial tracks. Do I use a plugin to flick between tracks? Sometimes. I have a plugin that I developed myself called Perception that is made by Meterplugs. And the main purpose of Perception is a loudness matched before and after comparison when you're mastering. So you can bypass all the plugins in your processing chain, including external gear, with a single click. It's sync compensated and it's loudness matched. So you're not going to get fooled by the loudness, the loudness deception, where you think it sounds louder just because it measures louder. So you hear it at the same loudness, and you can make a real world comparison between how it sounded before and how it sounded after. The other thing, if you just put that on a track that has no processing, it will also match that track to whatever reference level you're using. So again, then you can flick between reference tracks and hear them loudness matched. However, you don't have to do it like that. You could just as well either run the track all the way through and look at the integrated loudness and use that to measure it. You could use your ears. That requires some skill and some practice, but I was going to say it's the best way to do it. In some ways, it's the best way to do it, except that if your ears tell you differently than the LUFS meters, and then your music gets judged with an LUFS meter out in the world, you know, the LUFS is now being used on YouTube and on Tidal. Spotify plan to use it in future. It's being used on Amazon Music. It's a worldwide standard, and I think it's a reality that we have to accept. You know, we can offer our music to people however we like, but the reality is many of them are going to hear it after being matched to an LUFS reference level. And I think it's important to preview it that way and see how it sounds. And that's a good thing, because you can make the music more dynamic, take advantage of all of the extra headroom that you have, and get what, in my opinion, is going to be a better result. But, you know, I'm still seeing a lot of resistance to that in some places. So my process for reference tracks is always to turn, if the reference track is mastered louder than I would choose to make it, I turn it down so that it sounds comfortable at my mastering level. I can't give you an absolute loudness level for that, because it varies depending on the, you know, but the loudest sections will be at about -10 LUFS, if that helps. And then I can do a comparison between the two. And that's crucial. Often I get somebody sending me something saying, I've had this song mastered and it doesn't sound as good as X, Y, Z. And I ask them if they've loudness matched, and they say no. So then I get them to go and do the comparison on Spotify, and they're like, oh, actually, mine sounds great, because Spotify has been loudness matched, or YouTube has been loudness matched, or whatever service that might be. And that's just, I'm not saying you should preview your stuff online necessarily, although that is a valuable exercise. But it's just, it's the quickest and easiest way for people to hear their stuff loudness matched. At least it was. Nowadays, of course, you can use the Loudness Penalty website that I set up with Ian at Meterplugs, loudnesspenalty.com. You can go there, drag your files on. It will tell you how much they are going to be adjusted in level, turned down, probably by all the major streaming services, and you can preview it. Then you can compare it with other stuff, and decide whether you're happy with the result. So that's another alternative. For me, in a DAW, Joe, I bring in the commercial track, I turn it down so that it sounds right to me at my mastering level, and then I make the comparison. Or I use perception if I want to hear it at a particular LUFS reference level, or all of the songs at a particular reference level, as if they were being played back on YouTube or wherever. And in that case, probably -14 is a sensible place to be. Obviously, there's still some variety, but -14 is kind of in the middle. So we spent at least 5 minutes faffing around with trying to improve the video quality at the beginning of this call. Let's keep going for a little bit longer. Emil asks, could you please touch on how you deliver multiple versions from one master if you do that? Say you need a CD version, a Spotify version, and a YouTube version. Different masters with different limiting settings for each, or what? None of that. One master to rule them all is my process. So I have the peaks no higher than -1, which at the kind of loudness levels that I work at pretty much guarantees you're going to get a clean encode. So even if somebody has a CD, odds are the CD is going to get ripped. I don't want extra peaks popping out of the other end of the decode process. I talked about this in yesterday's call as well, so I won't repeat it. And so I master that version for CD, and it sounds great on streaming. It sounds great everywhere. It's probably not as loud as the loudest stuff that's out there. I do not get complaints. The only exception to that is if I'm supplying a master for vinyl pressing. In that case, excessive limiting can make things difficult for I say excessive, but limiting in general can make things difficult for the vinyl cutting engineer. A vinyl cutting engineer would generally choose to apply their own limiting settings. So I tend to remove the final limiter. When I'm working, it's probably only doing 2-3 dBs limiting at most, probably less most of the time. So the vinyl master that I'm supplying is a couple of dBs lower than the CD master, just has less limiting. That gives the vinyl cutting engineer more room to work with, and in theory, the ability to get a cleaner cut. The only exception to that is if somebody tells me that they're not going to be able to have a dedicated cutting engineer work on the project. If it's just going to be a flat transfer from vinyl, then I will leave all my original processing in place. And that's that has been, again, been the way. That's what I used to do 15 years ago when we regularly sent out masters. The company that I worked for was a CD mastering and manufacturing company. So we handled the CD pressing, but vinyl cutting was done for us by Abbey Road or sometimes Heathman's. And in both of those cases, we just sent out exactly the same master for the CD, and we often got complimentary messages back saying how great they sounded and that nothing needed to be done at the vinyl cutting stage. So I'm mastering as though it's going to go to vinyl all the time. Any kind of concerns that I might have for vinyl apply equally to any other format. You end up with one master that works everywhere. That's my approach. If a customer particularly requested some slightly different version for streaming, then I might be willing to consider that. But I would try and dissuade you not to. I feel like that's unnecessary money. I mean, I guess one exception would be if you have decided that you want a super loud master for CD, which I don't do. But if you're working with an engineer where that's what they recommend, or that's what you've decided you want, and that's what you're going to provide, there's absolutely no point in doing that for streaming because it's going to get turned down again. I would recommend backing off a few dBs. People will then come back at me and say that the limiter is part of the sound. Maybe. I mean, if it dramatically changes the sound and you like it less without the limiter after loudness matching, then fine. But in my experience, you turn the limiter off, the level drops, everybody goes, oh, it doesn't sound as good. And then you loudness match and you listen again, you go, actually, it sounds just as good, maybe even slightly better. So that in that case, that's something you could do. You could have, it's crazy to have a super loud CD. The CD is the highest quality delivery format. Okay, maybe not 24-bit downloads are higher quality. Certainly the highest quality physical format we have. But there are albums out and in the world now where the last Janelle Monáe album, OK Computer, is an example that springs to mind, where the streaming versions are a few dBs quieter. I prefer them. They're less limited. They have more snap, crackle, and pop, more space life, vibrancy to them. They're just more engaging, even though they've been through the lossy compression codecs, even though they're data compressed. So it's a, excuse me, a lower quality stream. It's the whole thing is crazy, but it's the world that we live in. So I think I will stop there. I hope some of those answers were helpful to you. A few of those questions were from yesterday. I will look through any questions that I haven't been able to watch, the questions that are coming in during the stream, but I will take a look and carry some of those across till tomorrow. And there will be an extended probably Q&A at the end of the webcast on Friday. So let me tell you quickly what's happening on Friday. My hope is to run several live streams during the day. Hopefully they will have better quality video than this. I'm going to do some testing now that I know this wasn't a one-off. I'm going to see if I can figure out a way to address this. So several web live streams throughout the day, hopefully. And then the main webcast where I announce the winners of the award, and I've got some guests coming in who will be familiar names to many of you watching this. That's at 10:30 p.m. GMT, I think. So that's 6:30 p.m. I believe in New York, and 3:30 or possibly 2:30 p.m. in LA, depending on what your daylight saving times are. Yeah, just subscribe to the channel, like the Facebook page, sign up for the newsletter, the email newsletter, and you'll get notifications about all of this stuff. And of course, please join in the fun on Friday as we all share ridiculous memes and blog posts about this and just generally make lots of noise to people about why we're passionate about this issue. That's it. Apologies again for the poor quality video, but hopefully you could hear me all the way through. Thanks for listening.